Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, as the case may be. My name is Arthur Raget with Ultry, and I'd like to welcome everyone to our session today. It is just coming up on the top of the hour. If I look at my Mickey Mouse watch, I've got about another minute till we hit 11 a.m. Eastern. So we'll give everyone just another minute or two to sort of come in, stabilize. I think at this point in sort of our worldwide work from home mode, I'd like to think everyone has figured out how to have both a Zoom, a Teams, a GoToMeeting, and a WebEx client all loaded on their home machines. So we'll get started ever so promptly. As a reminder for everyone, we will be taking questions throughout. We'll answer the questions at the end. Last week, we started a contest for the best question. We'll be announcing that winner today, and certainly do welcome everyone's inputs. And we'll just carry over the contest into our next series. For those of you keeping count, this is the 5th week, and this is our 4th Frankly Friday. We took off for the Good Friday holiday. And been very much focused on just sort of very quick snippets and real-time hands-on sort of, or quasi-hands-on demos for our Ultria CLM and Orbit products, and making this as informal as you can, all things considered. Today's topic will be, or is, streamlining the negotiation process with automatic version control and approval workflows. And again, for those of you just joining, we're going to wait another minute or two to allow more folks to join. Gives me a chance to grab a cup of coffee. Realize I'm on video, so hello everyone. So we're going to give everyone just another minute or two. By my clock, we're a minute after the hour. We're going to go to maybe 2.5 minutes after the hour, and then we'll get started. Again, for those who've just arrived, thanks very much for joining our 4th Frankly Friday session. Today's topic, how to streamline the negotiation process with automatic version control, which includes things like incrementing versions automatically, ensuring that you've got the right version in front of you, minimizing versionitis, all of that good stuff. And of course, what a great time for someone to be calling on my other phone line. As well as looking at the approval workflow process for both intake and request, as well as authoring and also electronic sign-off. Please do queue up your questions as we go, and we'll take some time at the end to answer questions as best we can. And as a reminder to those folks who were on the line last week, and for those of you who are new to our sessions, we are running a contest for the best question asked. And the winner of the contest gets a limited use license to our Orbit contract analysis platform for up to 500 contracts. Preloaded with our risk factors models for COVID-19, which specifically is for measuring revenue resiliency, as well as supply chain agility of up to 500 contracts. Additionally, the winner of our contest also gets to suggest a charity of their choosing. As long as they're a legally qualified charity, we will do a $500 grant to that organization, just as sort of a show of solidarity with the broader community of folks interested in contract lifecycle management. With that, looking at my watch, we're 4 minutes after the hour, so let us begin. Again, thank you everyone for joining us today, Friday, April 24th. Our topic is streamlining the negotiation process with automatic version control and approval workflows. Joining me today is Braden Robinson, Senior Consultant for Ultria. And Braden will be taking us through the demonstration parts of our sessions, as well as probably challenging some of my assumptions and or correcting me as we go. And vice versa will help with the questions at the end. Hopefully everyone can see the screen. You can hear me just fine. If you can't hear me, use the WebEx chat function to chat to the host, and they will walk you through how to make sure your audio is set up. Many of you have asked if we will be making recordings available. Yes, we will. So we will certainly provide links, PowerPoint, all that other good stuff. As we go through today's session, we'll include some information at the end. So today's agenda, we try to keep these to 45 minutes. This way you've got time to get to the kitchen before your significant other / spouse takes your favorite food off the counter, or your kids take up all the seats at the kitchen table, as the case may be. We'll do very high-level introductions, jump into a very brief overview, and then get into sort of the meat of today's session. And we'll start with version tracking and control, run demonstration, step you through what we mean by that, and then we'll jump into approval workflow review workflows, intake workflows, and sign-off workflows, and then a wrap up with Q&A. We are running another contest this week for the best question asked during the session. We're not trying to play Stump the Chump, okay? We're not looking for the hardest question. We're looking for the best question that comes out. The winner of that will win a limited use Orbit license for up to 500 contracts using the Orbit protector with the COVID-19 risk factors. This is really focused on revenue resiliency and supply chain agility, things that are very critical for today's somewhat changing economic landscape, and hopefully can help you get in front of some of those questions that you are either being asked today or that you will be asked in the very near future. Additionally, for a qualified charity of the winner's choosing, Altria will grant a $500 amount per check to that organization on the condition that we get to sort of announce. I'd like to congratulate last week's winners, Barton Malo. Barton Malo has been around for almost a full century, and I think actually probably just hitting their century mark. And they are a general construction firm doing very large scale construction projects across predominantly North America, US and Canada, of course. About 2,200 members and 15 offices. What may make them very unique in this space is they're a 100% employee owned enterprise. And that goes back almost to their very start. In 1954, Barton Malo decided to create a separate foundation called the Barton Malo Foundation, which is focused on returning to those communities in which they build and in which they serve. They've done some outstanding things. They've got an annual service week for their team members to go out into the community and help communities firsthand. So we're very proud to be able to support them with the winning award from last week. So what is Altria, and what is our CLM and AI solution set? Apologize for reiterating for those folks who've been on our earlier ones, but I'll keep it short. Really, Altria has two core products. There is Altria's contract lifecycle management, which is powered by embedded artificial intelligence, whether it's from a robotic process automation through the intake portal aspects of what we do, which is really to help with adoption and ease of access, through metadata extraction and clause analysis during the authoring and redlining and review process. This is especially useful when we have third-party content, i.e. contract paper that is not your own. And then in the post-signing, post-sign-off world, using artificial intelligence for risk identification, obligation management, and even some level of predictive risk management, the post-award world. Really, as much as we think about trying to accelerate contract signing, which is very, very important, it's just as important to make sure that you're getting the monetized value, those entitlements that are due to you, and that the obligations that are owed to you or that you owe to your customers are being met, is very much key for ongoing operationalization, revenue realization, and sustained cost capture or cost recapture, so to speak, in your contract lifecycle. Orbit is the artificial intelligence engine that is embedded within our CLM and has been commercially separated. We did this back in November, December, as a separate engine for those shops that are either not quite ready for a contract lifecycle process, or for those that already have a DMS, document management system, or an enterprise content management platform, but still are looking to run contract analysis, clause analysis, metadata extraction, and get information relating to protecting your contract value across the lifecycle. So Altria is a full lifecycle sort of request to renewal platform. So intake from business users, the drafting, the assembly, the internal review and approval, the external negotiation, ultimately the signing of the agreement using EchoSign, DocuSign, or just our own sort of digital stamp, and then going into that post-award measurement of contract, vendor, partner, customer, distributor performance, and then the renewal process. Well, to do it all over again, but do it much quicker. We like to look at the world in terms of the maturity of an organization that may use contract lifecycle and some of the things that they may expect from it. And I'd like to think that everyone on today's session can sort of put themselves in one of these segments or slices. Now, today's topic is going to be very much focused on the expedition of the authoring and negotiation process, where we look at the intake of contracts, the creation of new contract requests, and when we say contract request, we mean a request to someone to draft a new contract, or the request for someone to review a contract that's been provided to you from an external party. Go through the internal review and approval red line negotiation process internally, and then facilitate the external negotiation. And how that happens efficiently, I'll say, by leveraging both the automated version control as well as version tracking, change tracking, and then facilitating the internal workflows for the intake process, the review process, and the sign-off process. So just to set baseline before we jump into the demonstration, we look at the ability to track versions across time, to know which versions were issued when and by whom, and to be able to track sort of inbound versus outbound versioning in both the simple priority order in terms of what is the next one, as well as the revision numbers. And there are rules built in to make sure that the version numbers are effectively incremented based on who made the last change and whether it was a minor change or a major change based on clause addition versus simple reformatting or basic redlining. Likewise, being able to track who made the revisions, whether it was external or internal to the organization, and tracking some very basics in terms of who made the change, sort of the basic context, and giving the users the ability to review and download any of these versions at any point in time. Now, once the contract is sort of executed, you may elect to remove this history from your repository so that it is no longer available for discovery or evidentiary call. But the capability to have all of this history and granularity is there. In fact, being able to also look to see who accessed which versions at any point in time on a minute-by-minute basis, and whether someone had simply reviewed it, or whether they've made changes, or whether they uploaded a new version, or whether they've tried to compare different versions. So this also gives you insight into your internal usage on a version-by-version basis. This is very useful for internal audit and compliance tracking. So if you're wondering all of a sudden why one of your sales reps is trying to take a look at a buy-side contract, this tells you what the history is, etc. Now, just as importantly, of course, is what are the differences between these versions? So at all points in time, Altria has the ability, and it's innate and built in, to convert any incoming version format, including PDFs, to basic text, and does a text-to-text comparison. This avoids things like basic reformatting, bold, format, highlight, etc. It really gives you the base ability to understand who made what change to what text, where, and when. This is true even if the other party turns off track changes. It simply sends back a Word doc with a different name, with track changes turned off, or even generates a PDF and sends a PDF back in. As long as you can check it in, we will do the conversion and present to you those changes. You can do a single comparison, version to version, or I can compare multiple versions at once, as long as I don't run out of screen real estate. Likewise, you can go back and revert to any particular version and make that older version the now current version for ongoing negotiations and redlining. What I'd like to do is turn this over to Braden Robinson for Braden to take us through this and show it to us live. Braden, over to you.
Yep. Just as soon as I get the sharing rights.
I think you have them.
They should be there. I hope you can see my screen now. Let me know if you cannot. Otherwise, I'm going to start talking through this.
Please do. You're good.
Clear my throat a little bit. So I've actually got an example up in front of me. Let me scroll back to the contract summary and talk a little bit about this. Anytime you have a contract you own, there's some options you have in front of them. One of them I see here at the bottom right is actually to create a version. I can also send this out for signing or to a contracting party or check it out, edit it in Word. One of the concerns that a lot of people have is what's the appropriate number of versions? If you're like me, when you're editing a document, you probably have about 500 versions of that document on your desktop. Making sure that anytime you change, you don't want to lose it. Now, we want to maintain that process and allow you to have that simplicity of anytime something important happens, you have a new version you can go back to, but without the manual effort of figuring out and dating and naming everything so you know exactly which version. So if I actually look at the audit trail of a document, I can see every time a transition has happened or someone has created a version in the system that it has been created and numbered. So there's a clear order, gives you a little information. Is this something was done internally, externally? Comments to say what was made, what was done differently, and a time in which it happened. So you can see as they've put in order. I also have actions. I could download each of these versions, and I even can make that the latest version. So if 6 months from now, we realize that all our negotiations are gone for naught, and I need to go back to our pre-negotiation version, I just need to click a button. That will make this the latest version, and I'll change the numbering. That will go from 2.0 whatever we're on, 7 to 3.01, and make that the new version. But what's more likely is I want to see right before we go to signing, as we saw earlier, this contract was eligible for signing, what changes have taken place from the very beginning. I'm just going to compare the first version that was created to the latest version. And you'll see all of the information that's been happening throughout time. So somebody didn't want trailing digits. We took those off. Somebody added and inspected by. And I can actually go into depth and see who's added this and see which version they came from. This information is preserved in the system. We can see which paragraphs were taken out, when things were deleted, where addresses were changed. But also importantly, I can see exactly when and where metadata was changed inside the system. So at some point in time, this was called direct goods, but someone realized, no, this should be filed as business management services. This never appears in the underlying document, but it is preserved in our audit trail so we can figure that information out. And similarly, originally this wasn't marked as a master agreement, but we made this a master agreement over time. We also preserve in here by minute the access and change history of the entire contract. So we need to figure out when a change was made, who approved it. We have the review path, we have the negotiate review notes, but we also have a minute by minute record of who touched the contract, when they did it, and what they did with that agreement. All of this is preserved in a way that makes it easy to download and audit. This is very useful when you're looking at a contract, you're getting it out for approval, but it is something you may want to call from your system after sign off. So once a contract's actually been put into the repository, you can choose that all of this information is taken out. If that is done, if you've taken a contract and taken it out, you'll see in the final version, there'll just be one version in the repository. From that point forward, any changes made into your contract record, such as updating the contract details, will be preserved. They'll have that same audit trail and timeline, but it will be a new start for things that are already in the repository. This is The one other thing I want to call out on this is what happens when you take a sys document in and out of the system. If I check this out as a Word document and I get this document, you'll see that a Word document is created. Give me just a second as Word opens up this document. Inside this document, there is actually a token that allows us to track it so that when it comes back to upload into the system will not let me upload an errant version. It will, in fact, keep me on track and ensure that what I'm uploading is, in fact, the version I want. So I save this on my desktop. I go back to check in. And you'll see that the system itself is going to run a check to say, is this a correct version? Is everything right? Is this token here?
Now, Braden, if you were to change the name, would that matter?
No. If you change the name, if you change all the text, no matter how similar or different it is, this token allows you to validate that you're checking in the right version. No other thing matters in terms of this. So the token itself is embedded in the file, so you can't edit it, and that makes sure to validate that. I can see this checking is successful, so we know that the version is correct. I think that gives us the high-level overview of versioning, and feel free to ping us with any questions in the chat.
Braden, thank you very much. Let me take the sharing position back. Thanks. So now that we know how version control and tracking works, let's take a look at the broader sense of workflows. So when we look at workflow management and the use of approval workflows within the Ultrees CLM, we can really look at three different workflow types. The first is the intake workflow. So this is the request, the intake portal, even the ability to take new requests for contracts or to take contracts in for review from our intranet request portal, from our Outlook plugin, or from various CRMs like Salesforce or procurement platforms like Ariba, and bring that information directly into the Ultrees CLM. Once it's in the CLM, we have the author and approval workflow. And the author and approval workflow is that process that allows the contract owner and subject matter experts to collaborate on the edit and redline process. And then last but not least is the sign-off approval process. This is once the contract has been effectively negotiated and you're going through the execution process and you're integrating with, oftentimes, your electronic signature platforms like DocuSign or EchoSign/Adobe Sign. This tracks that process and provides the right order, the right information, etc. I think what you'll find is in a lot of environments, you really need to have an easy to use way to structure these workflows and not just sort of structure them, but try them out and sort of see how they feel. And the diagram I have up on the screen is exactly what Braden's going to show us in the real world product that allows the right users to create and to modify these in a very simple, very user-friendly way. And you can create very straightforward workflows with 2 or 3 hops, very easy to follow rules, or I can create a more dynamic, more robust workflow that may mirror the kind of workflow and approval process that you have in your organizations today. I think the interesting piece for this is it's an easy to use interface that allows you to build things that are very complex and gives you the capability to sort of provide sort of a pre-published save mode that validates widows and orphans. So those of us who spend a lot of time in editing tools, right? Meaning that you don't have any stubs that are here for workflows that are never executed. Those be considered orphans, or those stubs that never end and simply go to a dead end spot, be considered widows. So with that, I'd very much like to hand this back to Braden. Braden, if you can go ahead and take control back, or marketing team, if you can make Braden the presenter again. Braden will take us through the approval and workflow tool set. And please, I'm getting pinged a lot on questions, so please continue to fire them away, especially as we go through a demonstration. Braden, over to you.
So I have in front of me the approval workflow generator. This one I've called standard review plan. It's very basic. If I look here, there's actually only one rule in place. If the contract value is greater than 10,000, it has another level of review. But these can be quite complicated. I could actually have it's greater than 10,000 and it comes from a regional sales manager, it goes to another level of review. Or if it uses an external template, it goes to another level of review. This can be very granular based on contract subtype. You can have as many rules as you want. And oftentimes people do. The goal is to have the appropriate level of review. So I like to say, I don't need the CFO to sign off on me purchasing a new stapler. At the same time, if I purchase an entire division of a company, I probably want some process where someone gets approval for that. So you have this process in place set up so that it's easy to develop a workflow, that workflow is cemented, but it is only a minimum. You actually can go beyond this and add ad hoc workflows, and I will show that in just a moment. But I just wanted to show some of the functionality. You know, a rejection doesn't mean it goes back out of the system. You could change the work path. And the system itself has a validation. So if I try to publish or save a workflow, there will be a check for what's called orphans and widows to make sure that there's not a loose end that needs tied up. You can't have an ineffective workflow. You also have inside the system a number of tools such as out of office or delegation. So if a contract comes in, needs approval, someone's out of office, it's going to be automatically rerouted. And actually, when you set up these approvers inside the system, you have a automatic escalation policy you can put in place. So if after 2 days you need it escalated to someone, you can put that in place right from the beginning. So you don't have to wait around. Let's talk a little bit about how the process goes once it's in the system. So if I'm already in the system, if I'm a reviewer, I'm going to get an email. It could be something like this that says, hey, here's a contract waiting for your review. You see there's actually 2 links here. The first link will take me right into the CLM, and I'll show you that interface in 1 second. The second link I think is a little more interesting. It actually is a link directly to the Word document using Altria Connect. Now, someone actually pinged a question on this. I didn't pull this up during our versioning, but if you have the Altria Connect plugin, you don't actually need to upload the contract like I just did. You can actually save it in the CLM. When you have this plugin, if you click that link in the email to review it, you can do all your reviews and edits in here, including add and remove clauses or just approving and uploading contracts. So if I type approve, hit C edits, hit OK, you're going to get this option to accept or reject the contract right away. So you don't need to upload. You can. You'll still have the ability to actually manually upload it for some reason you want to. But you can just accept or reject the contract right from your Word interface. So there is a minimal need to ever go in the CLM as an approver. Similarly, it could be that during, say, sign-off approval, you instead of getting a link to the system, you get an email that gives you the overview and metadata necessary. So here I have a contract, cover sheet. It's going to give me a summary. It gives me a link to the application, but it also gives me an accept and reject. So I can actually click on those and automatically accept or reject the contract without ever going into the system. The other thing I want to call out, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, so in your email example, and you don't need to open it up, but I noticed that there's a PDF. So that's effectively sort of a deal cover sheet or a summary sheet that can help someone do a quick view while they're even on a mobile device, perhaps, and hit the accept from their Outlook there also, yes?
Yes. Though there also is a mobile app they may be using, this is going to be a configurable cover sheet based on the information. It could give things such as, hey, who's approved this contract, what information's in it, a configurable summary based on what you think is important prior to sign off in the final contract. So really it's about making sure you have all that information in front of you right away.
Super.
Our reviewers will also have an interface just like our authors. If you saw the authoring interface before, that allows them to go in, review contracts, and approve just from the web interface. So it may be, hey, I see this contract, I want to approve it. Do that right away. This interface is actually going to vary slightly based on where you are in the approval process, and you can change it based on the approval. So this was an authoring contract approval, but oftentimes they're actually approving just requests. So requests that came in, we saw those before. We'll give you the evaluation. And let me pull one of those up real quickly. We'll give you the overview of data and metadata, and you can approve those prior to authoring. Tell you, hey, here's all the information you need. You also have these abilities to add to the workflow at that point. So if I'm Ruth, the reviewer, and I come in, I see, okay, Amanda's made this request for a contract. Before I send it on, I want to add to that. I don't think that Ruth is enough. I don't think I'm enough for a reviewer. I need Carl to come in and do his analysis and get this information. I could put a note in so that when Carl gets this email, he knows, hey, these are the 10 things I need you to check off the list before we send this off to authoring. We don't want to waste our author's time with an agreement prior to vetting and going through the actual process.
Now, Braden, where do all those names come from?
These can all be fed from your single sign-on system. Well, these are set based on whatever you want. The maintaining the permissions is up to you at a role level based on either the data you're signing us or your administrator can set up and run the system. You have a very granular control over what people can see, what they can do, what types of contracts they can approve, and what kind of contracts get to them. It's really about making sure that you get the appropriate level of contract review at the appropriate position. So not too little, like I said, we don't want to avoid, you can't avoid and get around this information, but not too much either. We don't want to make, but we don't want a contract to sit 6 weeks because we need the CFO to look at it without actually having an approval process. All of this is easy for you to configure inside the system. Like I said, it is a simple drag and drop process. Really pulls all that information already in front of you, and you do this at a contract subtype level, so you can have as many contract rules as you want. And literally any metadata element can be used to route these. So there's things such as, I like to use the examples, I can use the time zone to determine who gets to do it. But realistically, region, size of contract, the length of the contract, whether or not you're using standard terms, are all very common in determining who needs to look at an agreement and making sure it's there. And with that, is there anything else, Arthur, that I have stepped over?
No, I think we've had a couple of good questions come in while you were working through that. I'm going to address one of them since we're up on screen. And the question that came in was, can Altria analyze performance metrics of the workflow? For instance, average time to receive a signature, how many versions required to get contracts and the like. And just to maybe answer some of that, since we've got this part of the workflow up and running, is we can measure analytics as the agreement changes stages, right? So we may be looking at the amount of time it takes to go from the initial intake request, the best first draft, or best first draft to the external party, how long it takes to go from the external party back, and then the total sort of lifespan across each of those stages. So to answer the question that came up, yes, we can, there's actually standard reporting available that says it took X number of days or hours to go from one particular stage or point in a workflow to the next. If marketing can give me back presenter privilege, we'll continue on. So I don't think our marketing team trusts me so much. We share the wrong stuff. And I know we've got some additional questions. We'll certainly take care of those as we proceed. So we are at that magic sort of Q&A stage. So there was the question earlier that Braden also sort of raised or answered was, it seemed as though Microsoft Word was external to Altria. We do have, and Braden showed, Altria Connect. And Altria Connect for Microsoft Word extends the functionality of template library, clause library, approval, full red line, the ability to insert metadata directly within the Microsoft Word environment so that an approver or a reviewer or an author can do, I'll say 90% of what they need to do, maybe 95% of what they need to do, fully within Microsoft Word using the Altria Connect plugin, which is, by the way, Microsoft certified, available through the Microsoft Store if you're an enterprise that uses the Microsoft Store model. for ease of deployment. Actually, we've even gone a little bit further, and anyone who logs into Altria can download the Microsoft Word plugin, the Altria Connect, directly from the login page. And that is configured specifically for a customer's instance of the CLM. So certainly takes the broad support. To maybe follow up on the question that we answered as we were wrapping up, and Brayden, thank you again for your demonstration of both version tracking and the workflow, is our ability to capture and track and run reports on a lot of that information in the process is very, very high. So there are very few places in that workflow process that we can't necessarily provide deep visibility towards. And these reports can be run at a regular basis so that on Monday morning at 3 a.m., a report can be run and performance information can be delivered directly to people's inboxes as a clickable link back into the system. It can be a CSV or an Excel file with raw numbers. It can be a PDF with embedded charts. Whatever the case may be. We're sort of big on being able to show how the use of a contract lifecycle platform can accelerate that negotiation process, because that's one of the key sort of values that organizations expect to get out of the level of automation. And I think it very much makes sense. Some of the other questions that have come in, and maybe this is somewhat related to the Microsoft Word related question. This is actually the opposite, which is, can I check something out from the CLM? Can I check it out from Altria? It says basically, can I check it out and then work offline with outside counsel and then check it back in? So yes, if there's a series of back and forths, or you just want to sort of run it between Microsoft Word and your email platform, or maybe you're even in a face-to-face negotiation process and you've got a contract up on a presentation shooter and you're redlining it live. We've actually done that with some of our customers. You want to be able to save that version and then you can check it back in. The version control happens exactly as you saw it, so that even though I might have had 3 or 4 different contributors during the redline process, I can get a cumulative readout to see what changed between the checkout and the check back in. This is interesting. Why do we separate the request workflow from the authoring workflow? Quite simply, it's because you may have different organizations who own those different parts of the workflow. And you want to make sure that workflow as a control process, and one that can support both the visibility and the transparency requirement of the process itself, is, I don't want to say it sound too uppity, but sacrosanct, that nobody can play with it. So for a particular contract type with a particular region and a particular dollar amount, there may be a predefined workflow that needs to be followed. That could be different from an intake request, which may have somewhat looser regulations or rules or control points, and I may have different owners of the intake process. So a sales contract request coming in from North America may be handled differently than a procurement contract coming in from South America. And I want to provide some level of autonomy to those individual business groups. There's still, of course, sort of that overriding administrative and security function that gives centralized control and visibility. And of course, the full audit of the life cycle from that initial request through execution and then renewal is tracked and audited throughout. Another related question, is our sign-off workflow compatible with the DocuSign workflow? Yes. So specific to DocuSign, we actually embrace that framework incredibly well, so that you have both not just transparency in the process, but almost a level of integration. So that once, and again, this is for those of you who are either using DocuSign or considering it. If you're using DocuSign as the resultant e-sign platform, once execution is completed, that signed doc is then returned back to Altria automatically. and it's queued up for publishing in the repository. No additional steps are required. Likewise, the integration from us to DocuSign, and similarly EchoSign, by the way, for signing people who are going to be the signatures for each of the contracting parties. All of that is also very closely integrated, so there's no duplication of data entry work. While I was answering that last question, a couple of others came in. Let me just see here. Indicate which trigger red lines. Can I ask the system or query the system to indicate which clauses trigger red lines the most to understand if we have a requirement that is beyond a market acceptance? This is coming from an organization that clearly has a librarian or a curator function for their template or clause libraries. So yes, and this is more along the sort of the broader sense of reporting, or really I guess it is sort of related to version tracking. So whether I'm in Altria Connect, the Word plugin, or if I'm using the browser-based tools, I have template capabilities, and it's sort of innate or built into our platform, but also clause and alternate clause capabilities. And this is extended visibly when I'm using Altria Connect. So Altria Connect is that Word plugin. Within a particular document, I can swap out the default clause for alternate clauses. And we support this concept of a default clause, alternate clauses, and then sort of your ultimate fallback. As red lines are made to those particular clauses and the document is then published out, we are tracking which clauses are used in which agreements and which clauses are being redlined, or therefore then non-standard implementations of those clauses. And all of that is reportable, and it's in fact one of our standard reports. And for those of you who are at a level of maturity where you are trying to optimize your clause library or your playbook, right, this is absolutely key. If I have, whether it's 10 or 100 or 1,000 people, making red lines on a weekly basis, being able to very quickly run this up and say, you know what? Force majeure, just because everyone's thinking about it today. Everyone is happy with our force majeure clause. We're seeing people make red lines to change epidemic to pandemic, a minor change, or people are looking at a termination for insolvency, and they're affecting my alternate 2 version of that. Maybe I need to update my playbook. So whether you're on the buy side or the sell side, or just intellectual property or even employment, this helps you streamline the process just to take another red line out. If you're seeing this because market is moving in that direction, or if you guys, I say you guys, I don't mean to sound so informal, but if you are members of organizations that are looking at standardization, whether it's AIA contracts for architecture and engineering, whether it's FARs and DFARs in the public sector, whether these are otherwise standard contract language, which we're seeing in Europe, simplification and standardization, or even the efforts around the .com or let's say Silicon Valley space to have a common non-disclosure framework. This can help you align with what else is out there in the market today. We've got 2 more minutes left. I think we've pretty much taken our questions. It would be no fair for me to award today, so we'll certainly consider those. As we wrap up, just to sort of let people know, what this sort of award winner will be, is a limited use license for our Orbit Protector tool with our COVID-19 risk factors. Fundamentally, just to sort of breeze through it, this is an instant of our contract analysis platform. It's the Orbit or BIT platform. And we preset risk factors based on input from our existing customers to identify things like force majeure, termination for insolvency, what are the rules around termination for convenience, to pull both appropriate metadata and identify clauses that may be suspect and may either provide wiggle room to your customers to get out of your revenue contracts, or also to help you identify where you might be able to put your vendors or suppliers temporarily on pause to optimize cash flow or otherwise manage your supply chain risk. This is going to be available to the winner for up to 500 contracts. So pick your top 500. And then likewise, we will go ahead and grant to one of your charities of your choosing a $500 grant. So to everyone who's joined us today, thank you very much. Speaking for both Braden Robinson, who also I extend my thanks to him. Braden, thank you very much for helping us out today. And as always,
you're
excellent
welcome.
demonstrations. Everyone, have a wonderful day ahead and enjoy the upcoming weekend. From Altria, this is Arthur and Braden. Thank you very much.